Champagne glasses sparkle under crystal chandeliers. A corporate executive stands at the peak of his career, moments away from a promotion that will change everything. One heated argument, one midnight confrontation, and then silence. For 3.5 years, a family searches desperately while a blue metal drum buried in frozen prairie soil guards a terrible secret. This is the story of Kevin Hamilton, a whistleblower who discovered $35 million in corporate fraud, and the conspiracy that sealed his fate in the coldest way imaginable. Before we reveal the shocking truth about what happened that December night in Calgary, make sure you subscribe to Silent Evidence Reveal and smash that notification bell. We expose the cases where power and money think they can bury justice. Drop a comment telling us if you think corporate killers get away too easily. Now let us dive into a case where ambition became murder. Kevin Allen Hamilton was born on August 7, 1980, in Seattle, Washington, to parents who had built their middle-class life through hard work and careful planning. His father Michael was a mechanical engineer at Boeing, and his mother Jennifer taught high school mathematics. Kevin grew up in a household where problem-solving was celebrated and cutting corners was never acceptable. These values would shape his entire life and ultimately lead him into a confrontation with people who had no such principles. From his earliest years, Kevin showed an aptitude for understanding complex systems. While other children played video games, Kevin built elaborate structures with building blocks, creating miniature cities with functioning traffic patterns and logical infrastructure. His parents recognized his talent early and encouraged him to pursue engineering, believing it would provide both intellectual satisfaction and financial security. Kevin excelled at Roosevelt High School in Seattle, graduating in the top 5% of his class. He was not the most social student, preferring small groups of close friends to large parties, but those who knew him described Kevin as loyal, thoughtful, and someone who always kept his word. His teachers remembered him as the student who would stay after class to ensure he truly understood concepts, rather than just memorizing answers for tests. He attended the University of Washington, earning a degree in industrial engineering with a minor in business administration. During his college years, Kevin met Claire Stevenson, a psychology major who shared his love of hiking and outdoor adventures. They married 2 weeks after graduation in a small ceremony at a state park overlooking Puget Sound, beginning a partnership that would last 20 years and produce 2 children who were the center of Kevin's world. Kevin's career began at a regional transportation company in Seattle, where he quickly distinguished himself through innovations that saved the company millions in operational costs. He had a gift for seeing inefficiencies that others missed, for understanding how small changes in logistics could produce massive improvements in outcomes. By his early 30s, Kevin had built a reputation as someone who could transform struggling operations into profitable divisions through careful analysis and creative problem-solving. In 2018, Kevin received an offer that would change everything. Mountain Wing Aviation, a major Canadian airline and cargo company based in Calgary, Alberta, wanted him to lead their operational efficiency division. The salary was substantial, nearly double what he earned in Seattle. More importantly, the position offered challenges that excited him, the opportunity to apply his skills to a larger organization with international operations. The decision to move his family to Canada was not made lightly. His daughter Emma was 10 years old and thriving in Seattle schools. His son Tyler was 13 and had just made his school's basketball team. Claire had built a successful consulting practice helping non-profit organizations improve their operations. Uprooting everything meant sacrifices for everyone, but the family discussed it together, weighing the pros and cons with the same methodical approach Kevin applied to professional problems. The opportunity was extraordinary. Calgary was a beautiful city with excellent schools and outdoor recreation that rivaled anything Seattle offered. The company would cover all relocation costs and provide housing assistance. After several long conversations, the Hamilton family decided to take the leap. They moved to Calgary in September 2018, settling into a modern home in the northwest suburb of Arbor Lake. The neighborhood featured walking paths around a frozen pond where Canada geese gathered, parks where Emma could practice violin outdoors in summer, and a hockey rink where Tyler quickly made new friends. Claire established a small consulting practice in downtown Calgary, working with Canadian nonprofits on organizational development. Within a year, the Hamiltons had built a life in Calgary that felt permanent and secure. Kevin thrived at Mountain Wing Aviation. He implemented logistics innovations that streamlined operations across North America, reducing fuel costs and improving on-time performance metrics that had been industry embarrassments. His colleagues respected his expertise and appreciated that Kevin gave credit generously to team members who contributed to successful projects. He was not a corporate climber who stepped on others to rise. He was a collaborator who believed good work would speak for itself. By 2021, Kevin had become the front-runner for promotion to Chief Operating Officer, a position that would make him one of the most powerful executives in Canadian aviation. The current CEO, Thomas Marino, was retiring in March 2022, and everyone at Mountain Wing assumed Kevin would be his successor. The promotion was never officially announced, but colleagues treated Kevin as if it was inevitable, seeking his approval on projects and deferring to his judgment in meetings. Kevin's family had finally adjusted completely to Canadian life. Emma, now 13, had stopped complaining about missing Seattle and had joined the school orchestra. Tyler, 16, had made the varsity hockey team and was being scouted by university programs. Claire's consulting practice was thriving with more clients than she could handle. They had built something real in Calgary, the kind of roots that suggested permanence across generations. But in the autumn of 2021, Kevin began noticing something troubling in the financial data he reviewed as part of his operational responsibilities. Vendor invoices that did not align with actual work performed, maintenance contracts that seemed inflated compared to industry standards, patterns that suggested something far more sinister than simple accounting errors. Kevin Hamilton, who had built his career on identifying inefficiencies, had stumbled onto something that would cost him everything. It started with a routine operational review in October 2021. Kevin was analyzing quarterly spending reports, looking for areas where Mountain Wing Aviation could reduce costs without compromising safety or service quality. He noticed that maintenance expenses for the Western Canada fleet had increased by 32% over the previous year, a jump that seemed excessive given that the fleet size had only grown by 8%. Kevin requested detailed invoices from the finance department, expecting to find explanations related to aging aircraft or unexpected repairs. What he found instead were payments to vendors he did not recognize, companies with generic names like Prairie Aviation Services and Westridge Technical Solutions. When he cross-referenced these vendors against actual maintenance logs, the discrepancies became obvious. The invoices claimed work that was never performed, parts that were never installed, inspections that never happened. His first assumption was innocent error. Perhaps invoices had been misfiled or payments had been incorrectly attributed to the wrong vendors. But as Kevin dug deeper, requesting historical records going back 5 years, the pattern became unmistakable. This was not error. This was systematic fraud on a massive scale. The scheme was sophisticated, designed by someone who understood both aviation operations and financial systems well enough to exploit gaps in oversight. Legitimate vendors would perform actual maintenance work and submit accurate invoices. But then additional invoices would appear from shell companies, charging 20 to 30% more for the same work, creating phantom expenses that were paid through Mountain Wing's accounts, and then disappeared into corporate entities that existed only on paper. Kevin spent weeks tracking the money, working late at night in his home office, spreading spreadsheets across the dining room table while his family slept. He documented payments totaling approximately $15 million over 5 years, all following the same pattern of inflated invoices and suspicious vendors. He identified the shell companies receiving payments and traced some of them to offshore accounts in tax havens that specialized in financial secrecy. More disturbingly, Kevin discovered that approvals for these fraudulent payments came from high-level executives within Mountain Wing. The signature that appeared most frequently was Jennifer Costa, the vice president of finance, a 43-year-old executive who had been with the company for 12 years and who controlled budget allocations and vendor relationships. Costa had built a reputation as a brilliant financial strategist who had guided Mountain Wing through economic challenges that had bankrupted competitors. But Kevin's analysis suggested Costa had been systematically stealing from the company for years, using her position to authorize payments that enriched her personally while depleting resources that should have gone toward actual operations and safety improvements. The amounts involved were staggering, approaching what Kevin estimated could be $35 million when all threads were traced through the complex network of shell companies and offshore accounts. Kevin also noticed Derek Walsh's name appearing repeatedly in the documentation. Walsh was the director of logistics, a 38-year-old executive who had joined Mountain Wing 2 years earlier, and who was Kevin's primary rival for the chief operating officer promotion. Walsh had approved vendor contracts that later proved fraudulent, had signed off on budget allocations that did not align with actual work performed, and had been copied on emails where the language was carefully vague, but the intent seemed clear. Whether Walsh was an active participant in the fraud or simply negligent in his oversight, Kevin could not determine from the documents alone. But the frequency with which Walsh's signature appeared on suspicious authorizations suggested he was either complicit or dangerously incompetent. Either way, his involvement complicated Kevin's understanding of how deep the conspiracy ran and how many people at Mountain Wing knew about or benefited from the fraud. By early December 2021, Kevin had compiled extensive documentation, hundreds of pages of invoices, payment records, email communications, and analysis that painted a clear picture of corporate fraud. But he also felt increasingly uneasy, sensing that his investigation had been noticed. Jennifer Costa had asked pointed questions about why Kevin needed access to historical vendor files, questions that felt less like curiosity and more like warning. Kevin made the decision that would ultimately save the evidence but cost him his life. He encrypted his findings on his work laptop, using sophisticated security that would prevent anyone from accessing the files without the correct password. He also made copies of key documents and stored them separately, a backup in case something happened to his primary files. On December 8, 2021, Kevin contacted Jacob Murphy, a corporate attorney in Calgary who specialized in whistleblower protection and securities fraud. They met twice in person, once at a coffee shop and again at Murphy's home office, where Kevin presented his documentation and asked for guidance on how to proceed. Murphy advised Kevin to report the fraud through proper channels while simultaneously preparing to file complaints with federal regulatory agencies if the company failed to act. December 19, 2021 was supposed to be a night of celebration. Mountain Wing Aviation's annual holiday gala transformed Calgary's prestigious Palisades Hotel into a showcase of corporate success. The grand ballroom glittered with champagne flutes and expensive decorations while executives from across North America gathered to celebrate another record-breaking year. Kevin Hamilton attended with his wife Claire, both of them dressed formally and playing their roles in the corporate theater. Kevin wore a perfectly tailored navy suit, his salt and pepper hair recently trimmed, and when he smiled at approaching colleagues the smile reached his eyes in a way that made people trust him. But Claire noticed something different that night. Kevin was distracted, checking his phone repeatedly, his jaw tight with tension that he tried to hide. Security footage would later show Kevin moving through the crowd with practiced ease, shaking hands and accepting congratulations from colleagues who already treated him like the chief operating officer promotion was sealed. At 9:15, cameras caught him speaking briefly with Jennifer Costa near the bar. Their conversation appeared cordial but tense. At 9:42, Kevin was recorded in what witnesses described as a heated argument with Derek Walsh. Voices were raised enough that nearby guests glanced over uncomfortably. Derek's face was flushed, his finger jabbing the air between them. Kevin's expression remained calm but rigid, the kind of composure that requires effort to maintain. Whatever they argued about, It left both men visibly angry. By 11:30, Kevin told Claire he needed some air. The ballroom had grown stuffy and he needed space to think. She watched him walk toward the main doors, expecting him to step outside briefly and return. The last confirmed sighting came at 11:47 from hotel security cameras. Kevin Hamilton, still wearing his navy suit, walked through the revolving doors alone and turned right along Stephen Avenue. And then he simply walked out of frame. What happened next would remain partially hidden for 3.5 years, obscured by lies and careful coordination among people who decided that $35 million in stolen money was worth more than Kevin Hamilton's life. According to testimony that would eventually emerge during criminal trials, Jennifer Costa had contacted Thomas Becker, Mountain Wing's director of corporate security, during the gala around 10:30. She told Becker to monitor Kevin's movements and alert her when he left the event. Costa explained that Kevin possessed information that could destroy the company, and that she needed to have a private conversation with him away from witnesses. Becker, who had been receiving payments from the fraud network for years in exchange for destroying problematic security footage and overlooking irregularities, complied. He tracked Kevin through hotel cameras and notified Costa when Kevin exited at 11:47. Costa left shortly after, and Becker followed in his personal vehicle. Becker found Costa and Kevin in a parking area near the Bow River pathway, engaged in what appeared to be an intense conversation. Kevin was gesturing angrily while Costa remained eerily calm. Then Derek Walsh arrived in his BMW, apparently summoned by Costa through a phone call. The confrontation that followed escalated beyond anyone's apparent intention into lethal violence. Walsh and Kevin argued, voices carrying across the empty parking area in the December cold. When Kevin turned to walk away, Walsh struck him from behind with a metal pipe that had been taken from a Mountain Wing maintenance facility earlier that day. Kevin fell immediately, blood spreading dark against the snow-dusted pavement. Walsh struck him twice more while Costa watched. The blows were delivered with enough force to cause massive skull fractures and immediate death from intracranial hemorrhaging. Kevin Hamilton, 41 years old, died in a frozen parking lot because he had discovered corporate fraud and refused to be silenced with money or threats. The three conspirators then moved into cover-up mode with chilling efficiency. They loaded Kevin's body into Walsh's trunk. Becker followed Walsh to a Mountain Wing storage facility while Costa returned to the gala, re-entering the Palisades Hotel at approximately midnight with composed appearance that suggested nothing more dramatic than a brief absence. At the storage facility, Walsh called Paul Martinez, Mountain Wing's facilities manager, requesting immediate assistance with what he described as an emergency. Martinez arrived around 1:15 in the morning and was confronted with Kevin's body wrapped in industrial plastic sheeting. Together, Walsh and Martinez loaded the body into a 55-gallon drum that Walsh had already acquired. Walsh used welding equipment to seal the drum shut while Martinez stood watch. Sick with horror but afraid of losing his job and having his own minor fraud participation exposed, they loaded the sealed drum into a company truck and drove in convoy to undeveloped land on Calgary's southeastern edge, property owned by one of the shell companies in the fraud network. Using an excavator stored at the site, they dug a hole approximately 4 feet deep, lowered the drum, and covered it with prairie soil that Martinez graded to match surrounding terrain. The entire operation took roughly 3 hours. By 4 in the morning, Kevin Hamilton had been erased. Kevin Hamilton's disappearance triggered immediate investigation by the Calgary Police Service and Royal Canadian Mounted Police. His wife Claire filed a missing person report when Kevin failed to return home, and within 48 hours, Michael and Jennifer Hamilton arrived from Seattle to begin a nightmare that would consume 3.5 years of their lives. Detective Sarah Lombardi, a 17-year veteran with major crimes, led the investigation. She interviewed dozens of Kevin's colleagues at Mountain Wing Aviation, including Jennifer Costa and Derek Walsh. Every single person connected to the conspiracy lied with practiced consistency, claiming they had not seen Kevin after the gala, had no knowledge of any conflicts he was involved in, and could not explain his disappearance. The investigation initially focused on Kevin's last known movements. Security footage showed him leaving the Palisades Hotel at 11:47, walking east along Stephen Avenue before disappearing into areas with limited camera coverage. His Lexus SUV remained untouched in the hotel parking garage. His phone transmitted its final signal near the Bow River at midnight before going dark. Detective Lombardi quickly developed suspicions about the engineering executives she interviewed. Their stories were too consistent, too carefully worded. Derek Walsh's alibi was particularly thin, claiming he had gone home alone with no witnesses to confirm his timeline. But without physical evidence or someone willing to break the silence, the investigation reached frustrating dead ends. The break came from an unexpected direction. Digital forensics analyst Rachel Morozov spent 3 weeks trying to crack the encryption on Kevin's work laptop. Finally, in late January 2022, she found the password in Kevin's personal computer's password manager. The encrypted files opened, revealing Kevin's meticulous documentation of the $35 million fraud scheme. The files detailed invoice manipulation, shell companies, offshore accounts, and email communications showing Jennifer Costa's central role in orchestrating the theft. They also showed Derek Walsh's repeated approvals of suspicious contracts and Derek's presence in communications that suggested either complicity or willful blindness. Most chilling were Kevin's personal notes indicating he believed he was being followed, and that people at Mountain Wing had realized he was investigating them. Armed with this evidence, investigators launched expanded fraud investigations that resulted in Jennifer Costa's arrest in April 2022 on fraud charges. But connecting Costa or anyone else to Kevin's disappearance remained impossible without a body or witnesses willing to talk. For 3.5 years, the Hamilton family lived in agonizing uncertainty. Claire became an advocate for families of missing persons, organizing vigils and appearing on crime podcasts to keep Kevin's case in public consciousness. Emma and Tyler grew up in the shadow of their father's disappearance, unable to grieve properly because they had no confirmation of death and no body to bury. The case transformed on June 14, 2024, when a construction crew excavating for a warehouse foundation on Calgary's southeastern edge uncovered a blue 55-gallon drum buried 4 feet underground. The drum was sealed with amateur welding and positioned on land that property records showed had been owned by a shell company linked to Mountain Wing's vendor network. Inside the drum, medical examiner Dr. Patricia Ito found human remains in advanced decomposition. A wallet in the back pocket contained Kevin Hamilton's driver's license. After 1,273 days of searching, Kevin had been found 15 kilometers from where he disappeared. Dr. Ito's autopsy revealed that Kevin had died from massive skull fractures consistent with at least 3 separate impacts from a cylindrical metal object, likely a pipe. The blows had been delivered with lethal force, causing immediate unconsciousness and death. Microscopic analysis revealed metallic residue on bone fragments that matched industrial steel commonly used in construction and maintenance facilities. The discovery of Kevin's body transformed the investigation from cold case to active homicide. Detective Lombardi's team obtained new search warrants and applied advanced forensic technologies that had improved significantly since 2021. Traffic camera footage analyzed with artificial intelligence revealed Derek Walsh's BMW traveling toward the burial site during the critical hours after Kevin's disappearance, directly contradicting Walsh's claims that he had gone straight home. The breakthrough that finally cracked the conspiracy came when Paul Martinez, Mountain Wing's facilities manager, approached prosecutors seeking immunity in exchange for testimony. Martinez revealed that Derek Walsh had called him at midnight on December 20 requesting help with an emergency, and that when Martinez arrived at a storage facility he found Walsh with Kevin's body. Martinez testified that he had helped Walsh seal Kevin's body in the drum and had driven with Walsh to bury it on the undeveloped land. His testimony was devastating in its detail and aligned with physical evidence, traffic camera footage, and the forensic timeline. Additional testimony came from Thomas Becker, the corporate security director, who revealed that Jennifer Costa had orchestrated the confrontation by asking Becker to track Kevin's movements and notify her when he left the gala. Becker described witnessing Derek Walsh strike Kevin with a metal pipe while Costa watched, and then helping dispose of the body while Costa returned to the party to maintain her alibi. Finally, Derek Walsh himself agreed to testify against Costa in exchange for reduced charges, admitting that he had struck the fatal blows but claiming Costa had manipulated him into the confrontation and that the violence had not been premeditated. The arrests came in waves during July 2024. Derek Walsh was charged with first-degree murder, conspiracy, and obstruction of justice. Jennifer Costa was charged with conspiracy to commit murder and multiple fraud counts. Thomas Becker and Paul Martinez received reduced charges in exchange for their cooperation. Jennifer Costa's trial began in February 2025. Prosecutors presented overwhelming evidence of the fraud scheme Kevin had discovered. Phone records showing Costa's communications with Walsh and Becker during the critical hours, and testimony from 3 witnesses who described Costa's role in orchestrating the murder. On March 27, the jury found Costa guilty on all charges including conspiracy to commit murder. Justice Margaret Sullivan sentenced Costa to life imprisonment with no possibility of parole for 25 years. At 68 years old, Jennifer Costa would spend the rest of her life in federal prison, her reputation destroyed and her family shattered by choices she made in pursuit of wealth. Derek Walsh received life imprisonment with no parole eligibility for 20 years after pleading guilty to second-degree murder. Thomas Becker and Paul Martinez received 15 and 12 years respectively for their roles in concealing the crime. Mountain Wing Aviation settled civil litigation with the Hamilton family for an amount exceeding $20 million and underwent massive restructuring before eventually filing for bankruptcy protection. The company that Kevin Hamilton had worked to improve was destroyed by the very corruption he had tried to expose. Claire Hamilton attended every hearing and trial, her presence a silent reminder of what had been taken. When the verdicts were finally delivered, she released a statement thanking investigators for their persistence and expressing hope that Kevin's death would inspire stronger protections for corporate whistleblowers who risk everything to expose fraud. Kevin Hamilton had been 41 years old when corporate greed ended his life. He left behind a wife who would never fully recover, children who grew up without their father, and parents who buried a son they had raised to believe that doing the right thing would be rewarded rather than punished. But through the determination of investigators and the courage of witnesses who finally spoke truth, Kevin's story was told and justice, though delayed by 3.5 years, was ultimately served. The case stands as a stark reminder that corporate fraud kills not just through financial devastation but through actual violence when desperate people decide that millions of stolen dollars are worth more than human life. And it demonstrates that even sophisticated cover-ups cannot survive indefinitely when investigators refuse to give up, and when conscience finally overcomes fear in those who carry terrible secrets.